So I guess we now get into how do we make this stuff, and that's at the cost of, the heart of some of the tools that we need and the cost that we will incur. Marius Vopel from MAGIX is going to explain MAGIX. Sorry. Thank you, ORF. I told you that I'd be making pronunciation errors. I'm glad that you guys are right on top of it. And Marius is going to tell us how they implement this with their tools.
Yes. Thank you, Simon. Hello, everybody. I'm Marius Vopel from MAGIX. And as part of Orpheus, we've been investigating some of the challenges posed to pre-production tools in an object-based workflow. And I'll be showing you some of the things we've implemented in our digital audio workstation, Sequoia. I'll be talking about 4 main points. Support for the production format we've chosen, which is BW64 files with ADM metadata, 3D surround, rendering your projects from within the DAW, and producing for variable length. So again, we've chosen BW64 as our production format, as was mentioned, which is an open standard, standardized in the ITU. And it comes with ADM metadata, which describes the different bits of audio in your multi-channel file, so their properties and how they relate to each other. Now, the challenge for us here was how do we map these to the existing internal structures in our DAW. So what you see right here is a screenshot of Sequoia just after importing an ADM, a file containing ADM metadata. And what you see is that already a whole number of project structures and things have been automatically created. So for example, the audio content level of the ADM is represented as folder tracks. So these are objects grouped together, found in the arranger again. And the audio objects themselves and their respective channels are represented as the tracks. What you also get is some automation curves, which have been generated from information in the audio block data in the ADM. And there's also some further information which doesn't really fit into the arranger itself, but is still important. Right now, these are placed as these tokens in the track comment field. Oops. And for example, here, this selected object has an associated language as well as an importance value. There are a number of other properties that would be placed there as well, such as can the user interact with this object, etc. To look into the future a little bit, what we envision for a better editing workflow would be a dedicated metadata editing dialog. So on the left-hand side, you see the overall structure of your ADM metadata, basically. On the right side, you see properties of the currently selected objects, and here's where you would define associated tracks from your project, so the metadata doesn't get in your way when you're editing and doing your thing, because the sound engineers are used to working in a way and you don't want to mess with that generally. Coming to the 3D surround. Prior to the project, we only had 2D surround panning. So to make full use of the object-based features, we added height to that. With that come some updates to the panning dialog. So you see on the right side, there's a fader which represents the height of the source. It's also visualized in the view in the middle using these circles whose radii correspond to the current height. Also, a number of 3D speaker setups, standard setups have been added you can work with, and also 2 new panning modes. One is built on the existing sound field mode, which was extended to 3D, and another following the VBAP model. Rendering in the DAW is a very important point, I think, for object-based production, since we know the final mix doesn't really come together until we reach the end-user device. So obviously the sound engineer would like to preview that in advance and make sure that at least in the most common sets of preferences and so on, the user will still have an okay or great experience, of course. What we've done here is create a proof of concept implementation of a rendering plugin. It's based on MPEG-H, since this was the distribution format in the ORPHEUS project. And it's implemented as a surround plugin. So what this does is it will bypass all of the usual internal processing Sequoia would do, so that all the panning and volume processing actually happens in the plugin. And right now you get a choice of target speaker setup, including binaural. And in the future, of course, we'd also like to add testing of interactivity features. The last point is variable length production. So you'll hear a lot more about this topic in an upcoming presentation. But for now, just to repeat the basic gist, it's assigning an importance value to a time segment of your program in order to make use of that further down the chain. So for example, you have a news program and the user would like to speed through all the headlines and only dig into the topics that actually interest him. So these need to be defined ahead of time in production. And what we did for this was define a type of markers on the timeline. These can then also be exported and of course also imported alongside the ADM metadata using the EBO core definitions. And we also added convenient shortcuts to the marker manager for an easy workflow, so you can simply add those as you play back your program and fine-tune them later. And that already brings me to the end of my short overview. I'm not sure if we have time for questions. Maybe a little bit.
Quick question.
But in any case, I would again invite you to come down to the demo in the studio room if you want to see this in the actual software and try it out for yourself, maybe.
Marius, thank you very much. Does anybody have a question? I've got a quick one. Mm-hmm. So, how do we get that capability? If we're a Sequoia user already, how do we get that capability into the tools that we're currently using? And what's the business model? How much are you going to charge for that extra capability? Because that kind of resonates with the question we had earlier. Okay, so what's the cost?
So the 3D surround part of it all, that will already be released very soon to our customers in an upcoming patch. And I think the rest of it still needs a lot of extra work. For example, the ADM support right now is very basic, so we have a good subset you can do stuff with, as we've shown in the project, but there's still a whole lot more. And also, as I mentioned, the dedicated editing dialog I showed, I think that's really necessary to work well with it. And of course, we want to make it easy for our customers.
But fundamentally, your approach is it's becoming part of the standard product from your point of view?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
That would be the vision.
Which is amazing. Marius, thank you very much.
Thank you.